talking about all the magazines that were lost at this last one Shepherd semester.
I'm telling you, like every facility we've used, they're like every 5 years, they'll do a controlled burn of the forest or the grass. And they're like, hey, we found magazines. We found some binoculars. Here's 2 radios. I'm like, oh my God.
Radios? Do they survive the controlled burns?
Yeah, and they survived the burn. They had all, they were charred.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh, it still works. So
was there any cook-offs from that? From the blanks?
You would think so, but because we found magazines with blanks in them from a burn and no cook-offs.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. We drop lots of magazines out there.
I can't remember what semester it was, but I went up there and I lost an old Anglehead GI flashlight, and I'd spent a couple hours looking for it. I was looking completely in the wrong place. I was looking where we went back and forth during the clandestine link up, but it was actually in the field where we were doing the fire team rushes during the basic warrior scores. And somebody sent me a picture of it all jacked up because it got ran over by a tractor.
Okay, well, there's that. Yeah. My God, think of this. You think magazines are the number one thing out there, but again, we were just saying how there's a very nice ACOG out there somewhere. There's other red dots out there. Binos, flashlights, those are very common. You don't know how many. What was that? I was going to say, yep, compasses. Yes. Compasses and wristwatch. You find them out there all the time.
Yeah, I was. I had bought one of these Fortrex for the 40th semester, and I was looking at it. It's like, man, all this thing. The only thing holding this thing on my wrist is this Velcro, and I was like nervous about it. And then Les at the end's like, I lost mine. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use a different method going forward. Whether I don't know, attach it to my rifle because that's not going to be affected like a compass would, or like put it through a loop on my blouse like Vietnam guys used to do with their watches.
Yeah,
I don't know, but after losing it off my wrist, I'm going to be way more careful whatever I do.
I mean, it was a great piece of gear for sure.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to use a GPS. I mean, the handhelds were nice; they have more details, but I find the wrist one gives you just exactly what you need and nothing else, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, back when we had BDUs, you could run it through the buttonhole, but we have ACUs, which are all Velcro. Who thought of that?
Yeah, who thought Velcro was the answer, Doc?
Terrible.
It wasn't me.
Brecor did it right, I'm telling you. So.
Do they still have buttonholes in their uniform?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
We have the only pockets that are Velcro on the blouse is the breast pockets, but you don't use those when you got your flak on. So the ones on the sleeves are, Velcro is convenient for being in the rear echelon, but when you're in the middle of right outside of the enemy's patrol base and trying to figure out whether or not they know you're there and you got to go in your pocket, it's not the best.
I'm telling you, I'm convinced the ACU came by because a couple of generals sat there over coffee and got real excited about like some sci-fi, TV series or an aliens movie and said, hey, we're going to make all Velcro NASA. We're going to make this like NASA invasion. And it's great if you're invading the moon. I mean, look at ACU with the UCP. Oh my God, it would be the best moon invasion uniform in the world.
So you're saying Space Force should use it?
Oh my God, it's built Space Force. Yeah.
All right, so we got 43 or so viewers in here. I guess we'll start this live stream. We've just been bullshitting here, let people gather in. But I'm going to turn it over to Doc here to introduce our topic because honestly, when we started today, guys, we were like, what are we going to talk about? We were at a blank. So the good Doc came up with one, so we're going to go with that. We're also probably following that topic. We're going to kick around some all these individuals from certain political persuasions moving to great states like Texas and Florida and trying to take it over. So we might talk about that issue. And then those of you in the comment section, we might pull some suggestions from y'all also. Bruce is going to be joining us. He says he's running a few minutes late, so he might pop in here very momentarily. But without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Doc so he can introduce our first topic of the night.
Right. Well, and on the second topic, I'll be playing devil's advocate. I will be the residential communist, I'm sure. It's fitting. I live in Virginia. That seems to work. All right. Actually, so all over the news these past couple of weeks, I've been seeing this pop up just about everywhere, and I'm a little like surprised at the sense of urgency around it, because it's something we've quite literally been tracking for more than 25 years. But you see this perennial issue usually right around the beginning of the university year, the August, September timeframe. They'll tell you, oh, males on campus are decreasing. And again, this has been, that particular metric has been noticed since 1970. They've been tracking that since the decreasing number of males enrolling in university campuses. They've been tracking that since 1970, but I think the sharp downward turn and, like starting questioning, wow, is this even sustainable, started being questioned in the mid to late 90s. So here's how bad it is, though. I think maybe what's kind of inspired this subject again is the notion that they are, I'm hearing anywhere from as little as 1.5 million to as much as 3.5 million students on campus. There's that many less this year than last year, and that this is an ongoing trend. It's not just that men aren't going to campus, but in fact, campus populations in their entirety are diminishing. Gradually, slowly diminishing, and no one likes that trend. They're very worried about it. Moreover, in that trend, 71% of that trend is made up by males. And so what they released is that the average university, college, higher ed campus right now is 40.5, so 40% and a half male, and 59.5% female. So essentially a 60-40 split. And depending on who you're going to listen to, as early as next year, I doubt it, but in 1 to 5 years, most are estimating that will look more like, unless there's a serious change, it'll look like 66% female. Again, it's almost 60 now, and they're saying, within just a handful of years, we're going to see it hit 66% female. So the question then, of course, is, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Now, before I turn it over, allow me to give you some other statistics. Many people will recognize this. Many of our viewers will recognize this as a trend called men going their own way, MGTOW, MGTOW. Now, I'm going to tick off a whole lot of, 15-year-old boys here, but MGTOW is not a social political movement. It is not, and it never was. But if you were recently rejected by the girl of your fantasy and you're angry, then I'd say man up, be a little more mature than that, because there is this in the blogosphere, in YouTube, there is this huge population that's like, yeah, MGTOW, yeah, we'll show those girls, and and they'll bow to our demands because they jilted me, or something like this, as if all the men in America got together and said, hey guys, let's not go to campus anymore. And it just isn't that. This is not a social political movement. It literally is. I think the term was coined in maybe around 2009-ish, and maybe a little before that. But it was literally looking at those trends that were recognized in the 1990s and seeing them continue 10 years later. They're saying, what's going on? Let me throw a few at you. And so this is interesting because it goes with campus, right? First, millennials today, men and women, are not buying cars. This was recognized in 2012. They've been writing about it every single year since then. Hey, Bruce. They've been writing ever since then. Men and millennials are buying less and less cars. And now in all the data I'm going to give you, let me just go ahead and say we're looking at 25 to 34-year-old. That's the age range. So you're young adults. Hold on. Single men for home buying. This is as of 2018, 7%. They are the single smallest demographic. Single males for home buying. Women are growing like crazy, and men are shrinking in home buying. And 22% of males, same ages, 25 to 34, 22% of males are living with their parents. Okay, let's keep going. Fewer men in the labor market. Here you go. In 1960, 98% of males ages 25 to 34, 98% were in the labor market. Today, 85%. So it's a huge drop, and it's a significant drop when you're talking 300 million people in the population. Men are driving the marriage rate and birth rates down. How so? Well, marriage rate that we've been following for, 140 years, marriage rate, its steady state is 10 marriages in that age group, 10 marriages per 1,000 people. Its all-time high was 1945, which was 16.5 marriages per 1,000 people. It is the lowest it's ever seen. We are continually dropping. This year, last year, it was 6.5. So just over 6 marriages per 1,000 young people. And this is huge because people say, well, it's economics. If that's true, and I'm ready to accept that, then how come our marriage rate is lower now than it was during the Depression, the whole decade of the Depression, which men were seeing, the men of that age group were seeing 30 to 35% unemployment. And now it's nowhere near that bad. And yet we're seeing the lowest marriage rates we've ever seen. Birth rates. Birth rates for a nation, for a population to be healthy, to retain its culture and language and continue itself, are a minimum of 2.1 birth rate, whatever that means. But just keep in mind 2.1. Anything below that is worrisome. America is, as of this year, 1.7. And that's very worrisome. You cannot sustain it. The lowest in the world are our fellow industrial first world countries. Japan and Sweden, I think, are the two lowest at 1.3 each. So this is not sustainable. Like, quite literally, they're saying you only have so many generations before you run out of your language, because it's just no longer sustainable. So there you go. You can't just look at the campus and say, oh, wow, men are not going to get degrees. Well, men aren't getting married. Men aren't entering government and corporate jobs. They're living longer, much longer, into their 40s with their parents. So the question here, I think, in front of us, it's an alarming thing. I'll say that, but then again, it's a 25-year trend. It's an alarming trend, but I also the question to the panel here is, what do you think the cause is? What is the cause? What's going on here? And then what are the ramifications? What are the implications of this?
Hey, Doc, do you think it's just because a certain percentage of those men are self-identifying as women, and that's what's driving up those numbers?
I mean, that would be a fun one to look at, but I think you'll find that the self-identify, like the highest group is teenagers, and I think it's up around 3% is like the highest estimate of that is like 3% of kids in their teenage years are fluid or, have questions about their sexual identity and stuff like that. By the time they get up to 20, it's pretty solid. And certainly by the time you get up, they're looking at ages 25 to 34. So by then, there's not much questioning left. So I can't rack it up to that. It's just too small of a population that we're paying attention to there.
Well, gee, I wonder why this is when we have a society that when a man gets married, he's actually going up to a woman going, hey, would you like to enter into a contract with me that you can break any time, but you get half my stuff? Yeah. Where do you think the phrase cheaper to keeper came from?
Yeah, but you got common law laws in the books, right? That kind of do the same thing regardless of marriage, don't they?
Yeah, so you got that too. And I have friends in Iceland, and over in Iceland, they have the rule that, it's like, I pay for yours, you pay for mine. It's just accepted, that you're with a girl. She says that the kid's yours. You don't dispute it, because the government's going to take the money from you anyways. So, the joke is, I pay for yours, you pay for mine. There's no family going on there. That's the most extreme example I know. But there's a lot of people now that feel like marriage is a trap. So if everybody feels you're trapped going into a contract, the other person can leave whenever they want with no consequences and take half your stuff. Why would anybody want to enter into that?
Hey, I was wondering if going back to the whole college thing of the greater numbers of women than men, is it maybe that we're starting to see a shift, at least in the male side of the house, that guys are realizing that, hey, you don't need to go to college, because all through elementary and middle school and high school, it's driven. Oh, you got to go to college. Everybody's going to college. They don't even talk about military or trade schools. It's college, college, college. But now that we have all the social media and you got all these success stories that of individuals that haven't gone to college, maybe men, boys are realizing that, hey, I don't need to take this path to be successful. Maybe that's what's going on, whereas women are still, oh, I need to go to college. I need to get a degree to prove myself.
Yeah, if I can respond to that, I think you're onto something there, Brent. And we're not the only ones saying that. I was just watching a board of, a similar sort of show on YouTube probably 2 weeks ago that was discussing this very issue. It was 3 college professors. I'm sorry, I can't remember their names, but it was an interesting conversation. And what they were saying is exactly what you're saying, Brent. One of them definitely, and I think the other two, tacitly agreed, was that men tend to do a very effective cost or return on investment sort of thing. And when you look at the university and you're saying, okay, 4 years of my life, I'll be $60, $80, $100,000 in debt. What's the return on investment? And we've been told, well, it's going to be wonderful for you for all these reasons. Now, full stop, if you're in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, math, and medicine, then yes, then it is a great return on your investment. And that's pretty much a proven pathway. And other than medicine, males, I'll point out that males absolutely dominate STEM. In the lower ends, males make up 80% of the students. In the higher end, they're making up 97% of the students inside of STEM, medicine being the one exception of STEM. So I would think that you're absolutely right there, that the males that do go to the universities now overwhelmingly go into STEM because there's still a perceived payoff. And that's probably precisely why the other males are saying, nah, hopefully they're seeing the trades as their, trade schools and things like this. Hopefully they're realizing that, HVAC and welders and electricians they're coming out of trade schools making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year to start. Now they're putting in some hellified hours, but they're starting. And, within 10 years, you're no longer, at the low end of the totem pole. You've got wonderful experience. You see a lot of them step off and create their own jobs, their own businesses, their own companies. So entrepreneurship, I think, calls men. Men are greater risk takers as a male trait, if I can say that. And again, this doesn't mean that women don't start their own jobs. This doesn't mean that women aren't risk takers or can't do effective risk analysis, risk mitigation. But it's certainly not been the normative behavior for women. They've always kind of played we can look at societies and say, you've always played the safer game. This is why men are in the dirty, dangerous jobs far, far more than women. I mean, honestly. So, yeah, I think you're right. Brent. I think that part of it is that men are looking and saying, there's no return on investment here, or very little opportunity for a return on investment. I don't want a degree in humanities. I'm going to opt out of this. I can't help but to think that's part of the equation.
That's a good point, Doc. You kind of brought up what I was going to say, which is that women don't do dangerous jobs. There's going to be that exception, but as a whole, they're not miners, they're not drillers, they don't build things, they're not out there working with their hands. When they're mentally challenged, they do very, very well, but they don't combine those with physical challenges, and men typically do. That's traditionally always been the case, but we're seeing it so much more now because I, like you, when growing up, was told college, college, college. Well, when everybody's told that and college becomes more available to everyone than it has ever been before, it's not competitive to be in college now. When you go and you submit a job application, I work with so many people, and I learned this first when I was working for Northrop Grumman. I was working side by side with a guy that had 2 college degrees. Why? You've got 2 college degrees. I can't find work in the field to make the kind of money that I'm making here building airplanes with my hands. And that was 20 years ago. It's worse now. So whereas there are certainly some jobs where I'm not saying higher education isn't the way to go, it is the way to go, but you can certainly make more money and have than other people that have a higher education if you're a smart guy and you're willing to work hard. And maybe they aren't. That's the competition, because at the end of the day, big companies, they don't care what your higher education is. They want a good, loyal employee that will produce for them. And we're seeing that more and more now. And I think that these younger generations that have come up below me, there's a huge portion of that population that understands and are seeing that, hey, we don't necessarily have to go to college. I can go right out of high school if I've got a good work ethic. And I'm going to tell you, if you've got a good work ethic today, you'll be successful. You don't have to try really hard because the competition is so strong, or the demand is so needed for hardworking, honest American work. And that the same is true for women too. But again, typically men work those more dangerous jobs and those more hands-on jobs. And those jobs are out there right now. What do we have a shortage of right now? What's been on the news for the last 2 weeks? Truckers. We need truckers. We need shipping guys. They're not saying we need you to go to college to learn how to drive a truck. They're saying have a good work ethic and come work for us. We're giving you $12,000 bonuses to sign on and drive a truck. 30 years ago, that wasn't the case, right?
Yeah, that's a great point, Bruce, because now they're talking to be a truck driver. You generally need to be 21 years of age to get a CDL. They're already talking about reducing that to 18. And I think they should. One, I'm in the logistics business. I need truck drivers. But 2, it's amazing the Marine Corps can take somebody and make them drive a big rig at 18 with 0 problems whatsoever. But that's a great question about this college thing. Is like, when did being truck driver become a dishonorable profession? We need truck drivers. We need bricklayers. We need electricians. We need HVAC guys. And somehow we got in society where we're telling the guys who were HVAC and bricklayers and truck drivers that, hey, you got to send your kids to college, so they can have real good paying jobs. And it's like, I have kids working for me that have college degrees in all kinds of things. And they're working for me at a logistics company. And
yeah, I'd like to respond to both of those, and just first to say that, yeah, let me give myself as an example. Bruce, when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, which was a long time ago, I was born in 1967. So if you're bad at math, that means I'm 29. But anyway, when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, one of our professors pulled out this article, a recent newspaper article, illustrating that the workforce, only 10% of the workforce at that time had a bachelor's degree. Today, it's 27%. 27% have a bachelor's degree. It makes you wonder, well, what's the value of a bachelor's degree? So that's one thing. I think you really hit the nail on the head there, Bruce, is just market saturation. Unless you have it in a STEM field, why bother? And then to what you said, Les, yeah, when did it become dishonorable to work with your hands, to put in a hard day's work? When did that become dishonorable? And I think I have an answer to that. You can thank Hollywood from the 1970s on. Think about who the heroes are. Until with very few exceptions, the heroes are those swaggering young men who fly by the seat of their pants, and competency be damned. The heroes weren't like, To Kill a Mockingbird or something like this, right? Where the dad or the hero is somebody who's incredibly competent, right? They worked and they strive to be good at what they do. No. You're gonna get rich and famous. You're gonna be a celebrity by flying by the seat of your pants and just accidentally bumping into, a $20 million contract. And this was sold over and over again to the point where you remember the 1980s and 90s and watching TV, which I haven't since then, but men were the butt of the joke. The dads, husbands were the competent guy who went to work, whether he worked with his hands or he worked, white collar. They were the butt of the joke. And they remained the butt of the joke in advertising and sitcoms and all of this stuff. Fathers Know Best is long since gone. And so I think the answer to your question is, when did it become dishonorable? Well, when society, and I mean Hollywood and the entertainment media, said competency isn't valued. And I think also this actually gets right to it. I think here's some of the problem. If you look at how many women are now going and getting degrees, right? And they're getting degrees, and they're not stopping at bachelor's. They're going on to master's because that's the higher earning. They're getting master's degrees. Does a woman want to marry a man who is less educated than her? And the answer clearly, poll after poll after poll, shows no. Women are not willing to marry men who are less educated because they see it as less of a social status. Are women willing to marry a man who makes less money? And again, overwhelmingly, the poll after poll says, no. I have a master's in blah, 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 and I make, $95,000 a year, but no, I can't have a man making less than me or being less educated than me. Well, then you've priced yourself out of the market. So that makes me wonder, is it really men that are driving down the marriage rates and the fertility rates, or, the birth rates? Or is it in fact women who are setting a standard that their mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers never set? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, historically speaking, men will marry across and down, whereas women will marry across and up. Because that's just historically speaking throughout the world. That's not just an American thing, but it's particularly important here in America, because here in America, when women have these standards that they're going to be, that they're looking for a certain type of male that may not be involved in that trade school, for example, that may be looking for, they have certain expectations that aren't conventional. Men simply are saying, we're not going to play that game. Men are simply saying, we'll go somewhere else to find our women, which is what I did and what I have a lot of friends that have done. It makes it very skewed for those that are in the market looking to settle down with a man and have children early on. I couldn't imagine trying to be a woke, college educated, entitled female in this country today. You will end up the crazy old cat lady at 60, because you're not going to find a man that will settle down with you. It's too competitive. And I can grab women by the shoulders and shake them and just say, you don't understand how it works. And they're absolutely so brainwashed that they think, no, I'm taught that I can expect all of these things and ask all of these things. And at the end of the day, you go through life single or with trash relationships your whole life, because you're not going to find that guy that women who are conventional, historically conventional, are out there grabbing up. How many times do you hear women say, I can't find any good men. All the good men are taken. Yeah, no kidding. All your hardworking men, someone else has grabbed a hold of and they haven't let it go. And I'm not by any means trying to talk down to women in any kind of way. I actually do see them as equals, not in necessarily ability, but in a partnership, right? Like someone mentioned, that my wife makes me, a stronger person. That's true. But my wife previous to that didn't. I had to learn the lesson the hard way. And I basically looked for someone with those very conventional values. And she brought those to the table. And I'm like, okay, that's the kind of person that I want. I know now what I want. I've driven a few clunkers, and I've decided to go out and invest in a really nice car. And I've done that with her. So, and I've got other friends that have done that too. It's surprising. I don't know what percentage of males that are involved in the workforce like I am, with a work ethic like I think that I have, that have specifically looked for non-Americanized women. It's got to be pretty high, because I have a lot of friends with those. So, hey, it's an international world and people can travel. And I've been called the international man a few times. And, here they come. They're there. They're available to us. Oh, and not to change the subject too much, but in response to what Les says, where he said that, he touched on electricians being one of those jobs. I was just working with an electrician the other day. And this guy's like, I'm retired. And I'm like, well, what are you doing here at work? He's like, look, man, he's like, I retired. He said, we're hurting so bad for employees. My boss called me and said, hey, I need you to come back to work. I said, no, dude, I'm retired. He said, no, we're going to put a number on the table that you can't refuse. And that's to come out and just be an electrician. You know what I mean? Like, that's go to a trade school, learn how to be a good electrician, have a good work ethic. You're going to be in high demand. And this is a job position that some young cat should have filled. But instead, they had to bring some old dude out of retirement to do, because those guys aren't there. They're not filling out those applications, and their capabilities aren't there right now.
Yeah, to touch on, it goes back to, I think, a point Doc was making earlier about the TV examples. Name a TV show in the last 10 years where dad's not an idiot. The irony of the situation is the one TV show that has dad who he fumbles around, doesn't get it right. Everybody's got to clean up his mess, but he is genuinely trying to do the right thing for his family, is Peter Griffin. Where, if you watched a TV commercial where mom isn't constantly saving the day from dad's screw ups, name that TV commercial you've seen in the last 10 years where dad did the right thing.
Yeah.
Name that one where dad isn't a placeholder.
They've been conditioning us like this for a long time. And, for better or worse, I'm just going to use this as an example. Think back many years ago, back when the vast majority of the country had, did not support gay marriage, for instance. Okay. What happened? We saw all the sitcoms starting to come out. There was almost a guarantee all the new sitcoms were going to have a gay character in it. Well, reality is that is a very small percentage of the population, right? But yet every sitcom you saw had a funny gay character in the sitcom, and it was virtually every show going forward. And over time, the American look on, homosexuality completely changed. And I believe it's because, look, you have Hollywood and TV and all this other stuff. That's what they were feeding people for years, right? Because it's like, hey, look at the funny gay character in these shows, every show we watch. And it slowly over time changed the view to where, hey, I like to remind people Hillary Clinton was against gay marriage. All right. Now try to find somebody in the Democratic Party that is anti-gay marriage. You ain't going to find it. So that's the example I'm citing here. Anyways.
Yeah. And the thing about all these like false social creative structures and narratives is that nature doesn't care. Nature doesn't play that game. Right. And what women really need and want, what men really need and want too, has been set in stone for tens of thousands of years, going back as far as you want to go. And you see it not just in humans, but in all mammals and in most animals. It's not something you can just sit down and walk away going, I'm not thinking that way anymore. You can try that and end up as a 60-year-old crazy cat lady, but you're going to have a difficult time finding a truly wholesome, fulfilling, loving, long-term relationship with whatever type of partners out there if you're going against nature. Because I think the numbers of people that actually fall into those types of categories, anything outside of the conventional relationship, are truly actually very small. And we have this sort of false idea, again, Brent, that much of it has been created through media and movies, which makes you think that, oh, this is more commonplace than it really is. You can't turn on a Western, a World War II movie, whatever now without them having some gay guy in there. And the reality is, at that time, it would have been extremely rare. Not saying it didn't happen, it happened, but it was so rare that it's far, far, far represented in Hollywood. And I think that gives people sort of this false narrative that it was more common even in the past than it was, and more acceptable in the past than it was. And For guys like me, I'm going to tell you, man, I've said this to all my friends. I've said this to everybody. If you're 30 to 50 years old, you look halfway decent, and you've got a good work ethic, you got a car, and you got a house, man, the world is your oyster. The choices are yours. You can have whatever you want in terms of a life partner, wife, whatever. It's you are the king, and you choose what you want to have. And I know so many guys just like myself, and some of them have been in this chat where they're like, I'm not getting married. I just kind of take what I want. I'm very happy and stable all on my own. Go for it, man. Be a lifelong bachelor and, burn you a path.
Yeah. Well, let me speak for the, let me speak for now. How about I argue the other side of the fence for a minute? And that is that I personally know women in their 40s and their 50s who have never been married, highly educated, climbed the corporate or government ladder, and have done remarkably well for themselves. They're high achievers. They've got a career that's enviable by any metric, okay? And are they happy? I'm going to say they're happy. Like if you ask them, if you check them out, if you see what they do with their lives, they're happy. And so if a woman feels that calling, God bless you, move on. Just stay with it. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. I do think what's telling is that the women, and I don't want to pretend like I know 300, I probably know half a dozen that fit that. And not all here in America either. I mean, I know them in Korea and Europe as well. And I have to say, the women who really fit that mold, purposely, it wasn't accidental. They didn't get shoved in there because they were ugly. Actually, now that I think about it, they're actually pretty good looking. So it's not like that, nor are they mean, cruel people. No, they're fun, and they're lively and worldly and educated and can carry on a conversation. So why aren't they married? Well, because they put their career first. Now, what's interesting is when they hit about mid-40s or early 40s, and they've really knocked it out of the ballpark in their career, there is that moment. There's one I'm specifically thinking of. My wife, who is South Korean, and her very good friend from high school. And she's just done wonderful for herself. And she is at that point now in her mid-40s saying, I don't know what comes next. I've had a wonderful life. I'm not complaining. I've had a blessed life, but I don't know what comes next. I've never had a husband. I have no children. I'm not, niece, nephew, too few to talk about, if at all. And they're saying, the next 20 years are rather intimidating until I retire because I've got no one. And at 45, you might find that person. But your standards, again, when you're making $250,000 a year, and you have been for the last, 10 years, and you're not marrying down. You're not marrying down. So who's your gene pool? And your gene pool almost doesn't exist. It's so infinitesimally small. And so this is the thing. And they know that. They look and they say, there aren't any options for me. I have done what I wanted to do. And for the next 20 years until retirement, I'm going to be alone. And that prospect doesn't sit well with them. And I think in general, you look at stories, there's, several studies, what are they worth? As much as you paid for them. But nonetheless, there is a noticeable trend that men generally get happier. Like men think that our 20s are going to be our greatest decade, but it's not. When you ask men in their 60s, what was your best decade? They almost unanimously say either their 40s or their 50s. And they say every single decade, I got happier. I did too. I got happier too. Every single decade. I'm well into my 50s now. I was lying earlier. And I got to tell you, it just gets better, guys. And I am married, and I've been blessed with a wonderful wife. But that gets to the next point. You're right, Bruce. I dated beautiful women. I dated educated women that I thought the world of and went on to happy marriages or a happy life without me because we could never work it out. And when it came down to it, it's because they were modern women with modern values and modern career goals. And I was a traditional guy that wanted to marry a woman that would raise my children. And I'm a traditional guy. I wanted a traditional wife. I was dating American modern women. And when I went overseas, well, I've been overseas several different times, but that's not the point. The point is when I started dating overseas, I started meeting traditional women, and I married one because I went, hold on, wait, what? You want, a family? You want a relationship like you had with your mother? Oh my God, this is fantastic. And do they exist in America? Of course they do. They're just hard to find.
Well, another thing that's interesting, a couple months back, Tim Pool did a joint podcast with these guys called Fit and Fresh. And they had this theory that at 18 is when the race starts, basically. And a man starts the race at 0. And he goes up because he develops a career, he gets skills, his value increases. So after 18, he goes up in the world. And by his mid to late 30s, he starts to have real value, and he can start taking advantage of his position in life. The opposite side, at 18, a woman's at her peak, and she only goes downhill from there. She stays at her peak till about 23, and then she starts a decline. Now, depending on the type of woman and all that, there's variables, but it's always a decline. It might be a fast decline. It might be a very slow, gentle decline, but her value, for lack of better terms, is constantly going down. And they were pointing out that in the model that a lot of these guys that are in their late 30s and their 40s, maybe even to their early 50s, were the guys that were snagging up the 22, 23, 24-year-olds. And the guys who were 22, had no value, so they couldn't get those same women. They were competing against somebody way above them.
Yeah. So I would say that their peak is probably somewhere around 21, not 18. But I get your point. If you're looking at just purely physical childbearing, then maybe it is 18. But I think beyond that, maturity and the, some worldliness, I think 21. But that's, you're looking at someone who did that, right? So I was 30 when I married my wife, and she was, 23 at the time, but I was 29 when I met her. She was 22. And that's interesting because, look, do I have data sets to pan this out? No, but it rings true because I'm thinking, I had this conversation with my 2 daughters. I was pointing out, look, my mom married at 23. Their mother married at 23. And I think you're right. I also kind of encourage them, don't be afraid to look at someone who's not. I'm not talking about, 48, but I am saying, hey, the rule of 7 applies. You guys know the rule of 7, right?
Enlighten the audience, Chris.
Oh, wow. You don't know the rule of 7. Okay. So here's the rule of 7. First, let's talk about the females' rules. And these are hard and fast rules. These were panned out by Jesus Christ, I think. Anyway, so the rule is this, that a woman shall not marry anyone younger than 2 years her junior. Otherwise, she's going to be taking care of him for a couple of decades. So never marry younger than 2 years younger than yourself. Now, that's just part of the rule of 7. For men, it's this. You think about it, really works well. It's half your age plus 7. So let's just go there. When you're 14, half your age is 7 plus 7. You should never date, when you're 14, any woman younger than 14. But when you're 50, half your age is 25 plus 7, 32. You should never date, a 50-year-old should never date anybody younger than 32. Well, this works wonderfully because basically I married my wife, and so you go, oh, you're 30, half your age is 15, add 7, it's 22. So basically at 29, 30 years of age, I found a good 22-year-old to marry, and I followed the dictum of the rule of 7. And so, but no, getting to what you're saying, I think you're onto something there. I wouldn't have put it that crassly, but you're onto something there that, look.
I are a Marine.
Hold on a minute, Doc. I'm gonna jot some of this down.
I'm just saying that it is true that a woman is, something of a peak at 21, and a man is like almost 0. It was so hard to get any, FaceTime with at 21. But by the time I was 24, suddenly, the 19-year-old, 20-year-old woman would talk to me and wanted to date me. But I was still too much, a diamond in the rough. By the time I hit 30, I started looking good. He's got a career. He's got a career path. I started looking good. If they waited till I was 40, okay, but now it's what's in it for me. I've got 40 years of, of being on my own. Why do I need you anymore? And you better come and say, well, but I'm 25 and I have all these wonderful attributes and I'm going to do all these wonderful things. You're just not willing to negotiate much unless they just come lay it down and say, look, I will treat you like a king. I will bow to you every morning. Then why would you do it at 40? Because you're, like you said, Les, your net worth, and I don't just mean financial, I mean your social status. Your net worth is peaking out at 40, and you ride that to your mid 50s when you start considering retirement, right? At least to maybe 60, and yeah, that's powerful. I hadn't thought of it, but that's an interesting concept. So let me take this back. So you have campus that's woke with a bunch of woke females who are highly educated. And as Bruce says, they're willing to marry laterally or up. And the college campus is hostile towards males. And I'm not the first to say this. Let's not pretend like, ooh, this is radically new. Come on. It's been hostile for males. Jesus, when I was going through bachelor's degree, there was a little bit of it. It was very, it was just an undertone. And, the Marxists, cultural Marxists and feminists, they were seen as something as an oddity. But they were there and, they were sometimes rabid. But now, I mean, as a male, why would you go to campus? What's the draw?
Well, that's another thing. Think about, especially you and I, Doc, because we're about the same age. When we watched our movies in the 80s, Animal House, Revenge of the Nerds, things like that, all the movies about college was a party. Class was something you skipped, and you partied all the time. A lot of guys have found out that's not true, and like for me, I have several college graduates working for me, which I find hilarious in the fact that you're working for a grunt. You're college educated, you have a degree, and some of the stuff they have degrees in, I can't even pronounce or things like, it reminds me of an old Greaseman skit where a kid called him in and said he was going for this weird degree in college. And the Greaseman was like, the light bill. And the kid's like, what? He goes, the light bill. He's like, what do you mean? He goes, how are you going to pay the light bill? When you go to college now, you get these weird degrees and all kinds of weird crap, and, what does it really do for anybody? Because all it does when you're 150 grand in debt, which is incredibly easy to rack up with a modern college thing, you've essentially made yourself an indentured servant. And I think a lot of people are just looking at the financial benefit, like you mentioned earlier, and said, yeah, I don't want to rack this debt up.
I want to chime in for the U.S. military here. So I left active duty and I went straight to school, and I knew I had to leave active duty. Now there were other reasons. I met my wife, soon to be wife, anyways, at that time. But I knew if I didn't get out then, active duty, anyways, and go to school at that younger age, then I was never going to go. And even back then, after 4 years in the Marine Corps on active duty, like I felt like Billy Madison going to school. But my school was completely paid for from start to finish. And not only was it paid for, and this was even, I started going to school on the Montgomery GI Bill, which isn't nearly as good as the post 9/11. But even then, I was making lots of money just going to school, where I'm watching these kids go further and further in debt. And I mean, I was buying guns with all that extra cash I was getting. So, I say that with, when I left college, when I finally got a bachelor's degree and I left college, like I had no debt towards school whatsoever. And I made money going to school. Whereas, the civilian quote peer of mine is starting off, 100 grand plus in debt from this piece of paper, showing that they can complete a program. So anyways, that was my little tie-in for freaking join the military if you're a young man.
No, absolutely.
And then if you want to go to college after the fact, man, it's a good career path.
It's an excellent point, Brent, and I'm staggered that I'm continually told that most military veterans do not use their GI Bill to go to college. I'm like you. I watched people struggle that were putting themselves through. You know, the kids whose parents were putting them through, that's one thing, but the people putting themselves through, they just struggled. And I'm sitting there living in an apartment off campus with a brand new sports car. You're right, I bought a couple of guns. And I'm loving it. I am partying, but I'm still doing the study because, you know, the other great thing was that I was paying to be there. By God, I showed up to class because I was paying to be there, and I was knocking. I sucked at school in high school and junior high school. I got into college, and no joke, not 1 but 2 degrees. Did not realize till graduation day that I had finished with honors. Both times, didn't even know it because I didn't care. But I did care about getting that degree, and it was a party back then. Man, you know, this is early 90s, and yeah, it was a fantastic experience, and I came away debt free. And so, yeah, I would say for people to definitely consider that if you know you're going to school, particularly young men, if you know you're going to school, military is a very, very viable way to do that. In just a little bit of comfort and style, but also with just a little bit of maturity. The great thing about it is you're not doing it at 18. You're doing it at 22 or 24. And so you're more mature, you're more decisive. Oh, by the way, you look a little better to the women on campus, by the way, and I'm just going to put that out there. Because you can buy beer and you have a sports car and you seem older and mature. But no, I'm serious. I think that's great. I still wonder if you wouldn't be happier in a STEM field. You know, I sure wouldn't want to study like female studies or something like that.
I would put one asterisk on what you're saying, Doc, is you have to pick the right school. I freely admit I picked the wrong one. I went to the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and totally wrong school to go to. You know, like I took German as a class. The teacher was from the newly liberated East Germany, and they thought we were going to learn great German because he didn't speak a lick of English, and the students would teach him English while he taught us German. I can tell you at this stage, I have learned more Germans from Hogan to Heroes reruns than I ever learned in that class. You know, and I had a math teacher from China, and probably a great math teacher. Didn't speak a lick of English, so I have no idea what he said in class. You know. Got 20 points for putting my name on the paper every time, though, so that helped. You know, so you got to pick the right school to get something out of it.
You know, agreed. It's easy for me to gloss over a lot of this, and you know me, I tend to speak in very sweeping terms, and I lose some of the nuance. But I'm mostly just echoing what Brent said, and that is that if you're a young man and you are considering, going to school for a degree because you've already determined, like I said, STEM areas, or there are a few others as well. You determine, okay, well, I really need the degree to be competitive in this career. Then I would strongly recommend, considering the military. But it's funny, Brent, because if the numbers I'm hearing are correct, what we're told is that of the American male population that is of age to enlist, what is that? That's like 17 to 34, I think is what it is. We are told that only 1 in 4, a scant 25%, can even pass the entrance level screening. And that's not to say that 1 in 4 are ready for infantry or special forces. No. 1 in 4 could even pass the screening. They're not ready, for what do they call it? They call it physical, moral, and mental. Come on, it's not an option for a lot of young men, and even less young women. So
yeah, if I could just chime in on that, it kills me every time I watch some of the comments on the One Shepherd videos. These dumbasses posting like, "Oh, look at these posers! Why don't you just join the military?" They have no freaking idea of the scrutiny that goes into joining the military. Not everybody, as you just laid out, can join the U.S. military. It's actually rather tough, and they have to jump through hoops and a lot of times, and a lot of people have to get a shitload of waivers just to be able to join.
You aren't kidding. You know, it's insulting. It's insulting to those young men and women who are trying to do that. I can honestly tell you that I know several people who said, well, I have diabetes, you know, and I it's totally under control, but the military won't take the risk on me. And I'm like, yeah, they're not going to. I know two people, who said, I had cancer. I mean, I've gotten over it. I treated it for 6 months, and it's been a year since. I'm in remission, but the military won't touch me for 5 years. After you've got to have 5 years under your belt of remission, because you had cancer. And of course they're going to do that. That's not discriminatory. Actually, if anything, that's protecting taxpayer dollars. But it's also making sure that you're mission ready, because the military isn't here to pay for your college. It's here to defend the nation, damn it, you know, to win the nation's wars. And so, of course, it's going to be selective or discriminatory, if you want to use a mathematical term, but it is selective. And so when you sit there and say, no, look at these guys with, you know, cancer survivors coming and pretending to be Army over at One Shepherd, I'm like, God, man, why are you insulting them? Because only 1 in 4 can even pass the screening if they wanted to. Yeah, terrible. Terrible.
Yeah, on that same note, you know, I see those comments in the One Shepherd videos, and the truth of it is, the guys in the videos that came to class were there, and the poster was not. And because the guy was there, he wins.
Yeah,
I totally didn't mean to kill the conversation.
No, I know. It has nothing to do with our current topic, but I gotta bring this up because this is funny as hell. So this latest video that I posted obviously was about the WAC course and Warriors Advanced course, and one of our black hat instructors, Ronhauer, wore a U.S. flag that wasn't reversed, and I have seen at least 5 comments that have, you know, guys going after him for this. Now, let me just state and preface that, yes, the One Shepherd uniform, our uniform at One Shepherd, requires a reversed flag patch, just like the U.S. Army. But, you know, I'm watching one recently posted like, well, if you got no business teaching a class if you can't even get your uniform right. And you know, I'm looking at this stuff and I'm like, where are these douchebags getting this from? Like, are you looking at these, you know, these tactical instructors in the civilian side of the house that have full beards and everything, you know, teaching their class and saying, oh, they have no business teaching their class because they're not abiding by the freaking U.S. Army's grooming standards. You know what I mean? Again, Reinhauer's in the wrong. He didn't have the correct patch on his shoulder. But okay, it's not the U.S. Army. I mean, there's several organizations out there that wear a flag patch in that orientation. I think, Chris, you pointed out the Boy Scouts. And I'll point out that paratroopers jumping into Normandy wore the flag in that orientation. Are they fucking idiots because they didn't have a reverse flag patch? Hell no. Those guys
they are. They're all idiots, Brent. That's why we lost World War II.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait. We won it.
But yeah, so anyways, I had to do this because this recurring comment keeps popping up, and I know Chris keeps addressing it like, well, it isn't our uniform standard, and I'm gonna correct him. But I'm looking at these comments like, shut up, dude. Not you, Chris. I'm like the person that's commented. Like, this isn't the U.S. Army. There's no freaking like. I mean, yeah, we have a uniform requirement, but come on. It's driving me nuts, especially the ones that are like, he has no business teaching a class. He doesn't have his flag patch reverse.
Well, again, it's not the guys that were there.
Yeah,
that were out feeling the burn in the field for days on end, training hard and putting their money where their mouth is. It's the guys that are sitting behind that computer. And I'll tell you what, man, if there's ever a law created, this is just me of Bruce's epiphany. I would love for everybody to be required to have like a statistic behind their name on the internet. Like, how fat are you? How lazy are you? How ugly are you? Where do you live? Is it your mom's basement? Because I think that would really clear up a lot of these, like what they call internet commandos, right? That are super tough guys behind the keyboard. But then when you actually look at who they really are, you're like, oh, hold on a minute. Now we're not going to give any credibility to what you're saying because you obviously aren't fit to go out there and train anyway. I think that would clear up a lot of things on the internet, not just militaristically related or training related, but we could apply that to Facebook, Instagram, and the Insta hoes and everything else that's out there and find out what's really going on with some of these people and how much credibility should we give to their comments in the first place.
Yeah. And I just got one more thing to say on that, and then I'll turn it over to let you two go at it. But Bruce and I experience this with our Vietnam films sometimes, right? We've been doing these LERP films, and Bruce is rocking an XM 177, which looks like an M4. I mean, it does. And we get these morons coming on there speaking with complete authority and 100% confidence, like, you morons, what are you doing? They didn't have M4s in Vietnam. Yeah, jackass, that's because it's not an M4. You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't think guys understand how much passion Brent puts into those videos. If he gets something wrong, it hurts him. I mean, he calls me and he's like, man, he's like, oh my God. Oh, can you believe this? How do I fix this? Like, it's a tragedy in his life. He puts a lot of pride and a lot of work into those videos so that when one of those comments comes up, he can go and just burn the person that made it. You know, and you love to post, oh, really? Well, maybe you might want to tell this guy, and a photo of a dude in Vietnam doing exactly whatever the commenter said never happened. But that happens across the board in a lot of his videos, but particularly on the historical ones. He does a very, very, very good job. So for anybody out there that thinks they want to post a negative comment, you might send him a direct message with that comment before you post it below the video, because he will own you, he will burn you up, and he will call you out in front of everybody.
All right, so you went down this rabbit hole. It's not my fault this time. I'm just pointing that out. But I do have, of course, we're down a rabbit hole, so I have an opinion. And that is that I found there generally, when you're talking to military, you know, well, not just military guys, when you're talking in general military, you know, military history, there are two prevailing thoughts. And the first thing, that anything good, cool, or useful is new. Couldn't possibly have come from the 1400s. No. It's brand new. It happened in my lifetime. So that's one thing. So when you see an M4 and they're going, or an AR-15 carbine, they're like, well, they didn't have M4s in Vietnam. Well, factual statement. In fact, they did not have M4s in Vietnam. They did have carbines that were as small and even shorter and lighter than M4s. So, but again, it's a good idea. So it must be new. And the second thing is that any new idea automatically trumps as superior old ideas. Let me give you an example. Started working in the early 2000s with CQB, Mount CQB, and they had really gone from high intensity conflict, and that's a fancy term to mean this. Think about Stalingrad. Think about taking a house with tanks in support, and you go, oh, like Fallujah. Yes. Now you're thinking a Mount CQB against a peer threat. Okay. So that's what's called high intensity Mount CQB, or it used to be. And then they started teaching in the early 2000s, because I learned all the high intensity stuff in the 80s and 90s. Early 2000s, they were teaching, God dang it, what do they call it? Precision. I think that's, yes, precision. So this was like considered mid-intensity. And precision wasn't with artillery and JDAMs and tanks, but it was still incredibly dynamic, but you pretty much had platoons and companies and squads fighting on their own, you know, and that was precision, Mount CQB. And then suddenly, you know, you had all these people saying, oh, well, that other stuff, that's stupid, that doesn't work. Now, they didn't give it up because it didn't work. They gave it up. They gave up high intensity because precision CQB and Mount was better able to handle a fight against guerrilla warfare. And then guerrilla warfare ratcheted down to insurgency, and you had to have surgical, okay, or the low intensity conflict. And surgical can be thought of SWAT. You're not actually necessarily there to kill them, maybe. That's an acceptable outcome, but you're really there to abduct them and capture them so that you can get intel from them, right? And you can fully expect that you're going to do this while people are eating dinner in the kitchen right next door. And so you have surgical levels of Mount CQB. And that started showing really heavily right around the 2010s. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in conversations or actually been to training where people are saying, oh, wow, I guess that's the obsolete way of doing it, because you don't even enter the door. You don't enter windows. I'm like, no, we don't enter doors or windows. Well, how do you get inside the building? Well, we go to the side wall and we knock a door into it. We knock a hole in the wall. We do that with a main battle tank. We'll do that with lots and lots of explosives, very commonly. And if we don't have that, then we just back up the infantry fighting vehicle and knock a 6-foot hole in the wall, and we all run in. Throw a couple grenades, it stuns the bad guys. We run in. They're like, well, how are you gonna like mitigate all of the civilian non-combatants? And I was like, they're not here. Think of Fallujah, think of Stalingrad, and they weren't there for the most part. There's always that odd case out, but they just weren't there. This is army on army fighting each other with artillery and close air support and tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, and it's just a bloodbath. So when you have, and this is a long story to say, each iteration of Mount CQB, that generation was convinced the other generation was useless. No, the target changed each time. The operating environment changed each time. So they're all completely useful. And this is like when I just heard a guy today, swear to God, today talking about how fighting insurgencies, changed the United States military. And okay, no discussion there. It really did change our tactics, our doctrine, all this stuff, how we deploy, how we force structure, all sorts of stuff. But then he went on to say, yeah, back in the 80s and 90s, when the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when the U.S. military was training to fight against the Soviet doctrine, that was all useless. Okay, let's see how that fight goes with China using insurgency and winning hearts and minds. You go right ahead and do that. It's not that one's good and one's bad. It's that we have generations and we have different methodologies, different technologies that are remarkably effective for what they were intended. So I think that that's a lot of the confusion on the interwebs, is that people come on and want to tell us, oh yeah, the way you guys were doing it was all wrong. Okay, what's your reference? What operating environment are we in, and what's our target?
What you got, Les?
Nothing. Doc's making a great point. On CQB, my favorite tactic for clearing a building is simple: nuke it from orbit.
I like it. I think one of the things that kind of ties in with what Doc was saying, maybe, is that one of the things Brent and I deal with when we're talking about historical, particularly Vietnam, that's been a focus of ours for a couple of years now, but is that there's sort of these, there's two reasons people kind of get what they have an impression of what happened in Vietnam that was not correct, or what's happened in that period of time that was not correct. One is on the civilian side, and I can talk directly to that. Where are we getting our information from on the civilian side? Well, we're getting our information from Hollywood movies, sometimes sensational books, things like that. And so we have this idea in our head of what went down, and we can only trust that those movies are accurate. Any veteran, any combat veteran will tell you that most movies that they see are not an accurate portrayal. I remember growing up, I would watch a movie with my dad, and then he would go to work, and he worked with a bunch of Vietnam vets, and they were like, yeah, that never happened. That was crap. Well, it's because Hollywood sensationalism, right? And I had to come to a realization when I really started getting interested in studying Vietnam, particularly special teams in Vietnam, that what I thought was the case based on movies and this idea I had in my head from childhood was not actually the case, that I was simply wrong in my vision of how some things developed during the Vietnam War or were done during the Vietnam War were flat out incorrect. And that's hard for me to admit, as a strong alpha male. I don't like being wrong. But as soon as you do admit that and you open up your mind and you start accepting the actual photos, the actual documentation, the stories that are coming in from actual vets, things start to fall into place and make a lot more sense, and you start to be a lot less confused. Now, to my second point, which is prior military personnel, I see a trend where they often get it wrong too. And it's a difficult minefield to tiptoe through when I'm having to discuss with a military veteran, maybe even a combat veteran, post-Vietnam, that has gotten it wrong. What are my credentials? I didn't serve in combat. I'm not a federal military guy, right? But it doesn't make them any less right. And I'll give you an example. Guys that served post-Vietnam, we'll say in the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, went through, served, maybe they're combat vets, and they go, we didn't do things like that. Therefore, it didn't happen that way in Vietnam. And that's incorrect. We learned a lot from Vietnam. Vietnam was a learning experience for military doctrine and how we deal with the enemy. We didn't go into Vietnam doing everything right. We went into Vietnam doing a whole lot wrong. And particularly when it comes to special teams like LRPS, SOG, Mike 4, Special Forces, whatever, the military gave them a giant berth in terms of what they wanted to do. You want to carry a foreign weapon? Okay, carry a foreign weapon. Just make sure you knew how to use it before you go into combat. That doesn't happen today. Brent, were you ever just told grab up a foreign weapon and go into combat with that?
No, I did try to use a captured enemy PK though.
How did that work out for you?
It didn't, man.
Yeah,
It's a long story.
But guys in Vietnam would particularly with special teams, would regularly do that. And it wasn't even an issue. It wasn't even questioned. They would employ tactics that were completely contrary to what we know today and what we've written today as being the way to do it. But you have to understand, at some point in time, we had to make those mistakes to figure out this is not the right way to do it. And a lot of that actually occurred in Vietnam. So guys were just told, hey, go out and try it and report back to us what happened. And if the 4-man fire team didn't show back up, then after a little while, they decided that probably didn't work out. Let's do something different next time. But the point being that it did happen, and they did try that out. And I think that that's something that, to Doc's point, is that what previous generations have done, that does change within the military. Doctrine changes, how we engage the enemy, logistics change. Everything to do with the military is constantly tweaked based on multiple factors. And it's never going to be the same because you're never going to have the same battlefield in front of you. Every war is different. That's pretty clear. Where we fought in World War II is very different from where we fought in World War II, or World War I, World War II, Civil War, Vietnam, and then we go to Desert Storm. What's similar between Vietnam and Desert Storm? You couldn't have two more different environments. So obviously your tactics are going to change, and you can't always directly correlate what you learned for a battle going into Desert Storm to what troops learned for a battle going into Vietnam.
Well, here's a fact that illustrates the point, and I'm sure Doc will back me up on this. Anything you read about Vietnam, whether it's an accurate book, portrayal, movie, the M60 machine gun was king. It ruled the battlefield. It mowed trees down. It wiped out enemy formations by the dozens, and one man handled it, and, he was invincible with it. My generation, when we got the M60, thought it sucked, mainly because it was worn out. And we got pieces of crap, and keeping your M60 running was a major accomplishment. I'm sure, Doc, you've done it too. One of the things you awesomely did is launch the BFA downrange. That happened a lot. Lost the fire control group at least once. You learned to dummy cord that to the gun because that thing would come off when that leaf spring that was worn out fell off, and then you're walking patrol and go to use your M60 and find out you don't have a pistol grip and trigger. All kinds of things like that. I mean, I know no one of my generation who thinks highly of the M60.
Well, so I do, but here's why. We all had a very low opinion of the M60 machine gun. We'd heard legacies and all this other stuff. And so when my first year in the infantry, I was an M60 machine gunner, and I hated that thing for about the first 5 months. I had the good fortune that it was run over by the infantry fighting vehicle. Okay. It was destroyed as I was in the field trying to get hot A's out in the winter, and it was dark. And one of the rules was the machine gunner could always leave it with his crew and grab one of their rifles to go to the chow line. So I was like, oh, great. And they're feeding us out of some deuce and a half out in the middle of God knows where, some mountain in Korea. And when I got back, everybody in the squad's like, dude, don't be angry. Don't be angry. And I'm like, uh-oh. You know, when people, that's how they meet you with your plate of warm, paper plate of warm food. You're like, wait, what's going on? And sure enough, Kretz, our one guy in our squad and our driver, he had backed over that thing and just crushed it beyond recognition. So I go back and they rebuild with just like the smallest couple of pieces, like the leaf spring was one of the pieces they salvaged, right? And they build me this brand new M60. Parkerizing on it is beautiful. It's got a new housing and everything. You couldn't get it not to fire. You couldn't get it not to fire. I think I could have put a Volkswagen Bug in there and it would have shot it right out the other end. It just, everything. Pair of socks. It just loved to shoot. I couldn't get it to jam. It was a fantastic weapon. And of course, that raised all sorts of eyebrows in the company. And we said, hey, what gives? And that's when they came out and admitted, oh, well, M60s, the housing metal is too soft. And that over so many thousand rounds, 20,000, 30,000 rounds, it stretches out and it will no longer, it's T&E, it's timing and headspace will no longer match. And we're like, that's it. That's why the M60 was such a fantastic weapon. And it's also why the Army got rid of it.
Yeah, the M60 has somewhat of a short lifespan in that respect. If it's new and well serviced, it's always been a fantastic weapon. But like Les said, when they get wore out, they're garbage. And you're exactly right. The receiver does stretch because it's stamped steel, and which is why they replaced it with the 240, which is machine steel. But I think that most people that were able to train on both, there might not be a lot out there, but that trained on both new, almost always will prefer the M60.
Well, it is lighter for sure. I mean, it looks way more sinister, which is awesome. The bipod's a little better placed. It is a little more ergonomic to use when not deployed on the bipod. The 240, on the other hand, being a derivative of the FN mag, is relentlessly reliable. You don't read any stories anywhere in any army where the mag doesn't perform.
It's a fantastic medium machine gun or general purpose machine gun. The 240 Mag 58, GPMG, whatever you want to call it, goes by lots of different names, and it serves with a lot of different militaries for precisely that reason. It's got a fantastic reputation. The one thing I did not like about the M240, it is a little heavier than the M60, but my thing that I did not like about it was the rate of fire. Dude, you're part of a 3-man, machine gun crew. There's reason there's 3 of you. You're carrying everything. And that 240 just burns through ammo. I'm like, whoa. Where's the semi-auto on this thing? I mean, Jesus Christ. That was way too fast. The very first ones came out, I think we're firing like 1,100 rounds a minute. The M60 is barely maintaining 600. I like 600.
Well, the real flaw of the 240 over the M60 is the lack of shoulder rest. Because we all know on the M60, the shoulder rest fits right up there. You get in that position, and man, you can get some great Z's that way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, 60 was a good machine gun. It really was. It just, like I said, and I'm told that the reason the SEALs kept using it is they figured out a way to harden the housing, that it didn't stretch. Or that's all a lie, and they went, we got a big budget, we'll just shoot it till it stretches and throw it away. One of the two.
There you go. I think you found the answer there, Doc.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, you'll never hear me talk ill of the M240. That's my baby.
It's a good machine gun.
My brother loved it as well.
Well, I'll go you one farther. I like the 249. That's what I served my second year on, was a 249. And it's just a baby 240. It was fantastic. And I heard everybody hated them later. And I was like, why do you guys hate them so much? And I looked at the garbage. They're going, cause this. I just started laughing. I'm like, oh, I've been there. Me and the M60. Yeah, that was garbage too. By the time it was handed to you, it was just worn out, guys. It was just done. I'm like, no, this is a beautiful weapon. They're like, no, it won't even fire one round at a time. And I'm like, no, you get them brand new. True story. Did a 12-mile force march, went right into a live fire, platoon live fire, in the rain and the snow. Get up, go to clear the range, and I get up, pop open the feed tray, and there is a marble-sized piece of brass that didn't eject right, went right back in the housing, and that just pounded it into a marble and never stopped firing. That 249 was wonderful.
I got a funny story about the 240. So this is early days on ship. We're firing when Marines are on ship. We usually fire off like the back decks of the ship. So we had set up a machine gun chute on the back flight deck of an LPD-8. I think it was the USS Dubuque. But we're sitting there. We got M240 Golf, and I was the gunner, and the retaining pin on my trigger housing slowly was wiggling out as I was shooting this range, right? And they were giving us belts of a certain set amount, and we had some. The range was set up so that we would shoot, and then some 11s would move forward, simulating, overhead fire and stuff like that, and shifting fire and everything. So we weren't supposed to shoot at certain times. And I remember my team leader had placed a freaking a belt of like 10 on the feed tray, closed the top cover, and then as soon as I racked that bolt to the rear and went to push it forward, that sucker went, but it was only a belt of like 10. So I look over at my team leader, and he looks at me like dumbfounded, and then all of a sudden I just went, whoop! I got pulled. Some sergeant came up, he grabbed the handle of my deuce gear on my flak and ripped me off that gun faster than anybody could say anything. And they're shining a light, and they're like, what the hell just happened? I was like, I swear to God, I didn't even pull the trigger. I just racked the machine gun. And they're looking at it, and the trigger housing's still sitting there on the gun. And they're looking and looking, and then all of a sudden, they start taking the machine gun off the tripod, and that trigger housing just falls to the ground. Then they found the retaining pin inside this little grate, thing for chains. But it was funny because it was a night shoot. No one would have known or seen that retaining pin like making its way out, slowly walking out. But by the time, these M240 Golfs had ran the course, man, they've had thousands of rounds through them by the time I was, ever issued that machine gun. So same thing with M60. Yeah.
And we're saying thousands. What we mean is tens of thousands, potentially 100,000. I mean, it's not a small number. So I got a couple of my M60 stories, and one that I know Marines love the Marine Corps, and Army, we love our regiments. We hate the Army. We just despise the Army, and we're bitter about it. And so one of my Army moments was very first time I ever got to fire a machine gun. This is something I've dreamt about, being an Army brat and seeing it all the time and knowing what the M60 was. I dreamt about this, guys. This to me is fantasy. And so I'm standing up. We're doing just a fam fire. They give you a 100-round belt. They don't even give you the machine gun. They're all set up on tripods up on this high berm. We're at School of the Infantry, and so we're going to go burn up a 100-round belt. And they are screaming and yelling. They're kicking us and doing all this shit that they did back then. And it's a hot-ass day in Georgia. And so I'm sitting there just sweltering, like almost passing out, and people are kicking me, and I get up there, and they're screaming and yelling at me, just making me, it's horrible. It's a horrible experience. I put the belt in, I slap down the feed tray, I charge it, I put that thing on fire, and I squeezed the whole 100 rounds. I just as quickly, I wanted to get away from that guy who was kicking me. He was kicking me. This sergeant was kicking. So I'm like, just squeezed it as fast as I could, and the whole rounds go down. And the funny thing at that time, I remember he stops because everybody's looking at his station now, and he stoops over, and for the first time, he was human to me. And he goes, "Hey, dude, that's called a runaway gun," because he thought the barrel started cooking him off. It wasn't a runaway gun. I mashed the trigger, but he thought it was a runaway gun. He goes, "Hey, man, if it does that, just like hit the belt, break it right in two. It'll take care of that." And I was like, "Yes, Sergeant." And I stood up and I just walked down, and I'm not joking, I was this close to tears. Something I had dreamt about for 15 years of my life since I was a little kid, and I'm walking down this grass knoll, and it was miserable. How can you make machine guns miserable? And this thought went right like an epiphany right through my head. I thought, well, I'm at School of the Infantry. They fucked up machine guns for me. I sure hope they don't have sex education.
So my great M60 story is we're out on the Belleau Wood and we get in a whole load of midshipmen. So, of course, the Navy's great idea. Hey, Marines, teach them how to shoot the M60 machine gun. So I get put in charge of this class, and it goes about as disastrously as you can imagine with midshipmen. We got a barrel in the water, and I'm, lucky they're hitting the water, And about the fifth middy gets on the gun, and I'm like, please try to hit the target. He's like, no problem. Pops up to a knee. Down goes the barrel. I'm like, okay, that was impressive. He goes, oh, yeah, I was an 0331 when I was enlisted. I'm like, class is yours, dude.
So, in the military, again, this is the Army. You have to mess up in order to get assigned to anything. The people, I think, again, people who don't understand the military, they hear call signs and nicknames, and they think, oh yeah, it's Maverick, it's Dragon Eater, it's things like this. It's like, no, you're called Lollipop, and you're called Lollipop for the most embarrassing reason, and you never want your family to know why you're called Lollipop. So it's just humiliating, and that's how you get promoted, and that's how you get assignments. So I get to Korea, and they go, hey, you private nobody, get your ass over here. This is an M60 machine gun. I'm like, I've seen one before. I know it. I went to School of the Infantry, and they're like, no, disassemble it. And I'm trying to, and this Corporal Bear, if you're out there, I still hate you. And he goes, let me show you how to do that. So he breaks it all down in front of me in the day room on the floor. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, I'll be back in 5 minutes. You have it back together. Ah, crap. And he walked away, and it's just me and this stupid parts. And I'm like, it's like, Legos. I'm like, well, I think this goes in. I get it. And I get the butt stock on. I get the feed tray closed. And I'm like, yes, that is how it's done, baby. Yes. I'm just feeling great. So Corporal Bear, he comes back and he looks and he's like, huh, look at that. You got it together and no parts are missing. He's like, damn, I don't believe this, I think. And he opens the feed tray and he looks down and he just goes, oh, hey guys, come watch this. Come look this. You're not going to believe this. And I was like, yes, see, that's how good I am. And he's like, look, he got the whole entire insides put in backwards. And it did. I did not know you could put the guide rod, the bolt carrier, all of it. I put everything in backwards and it fit. And from that point on, they were like, dude, you're a machine gunner. True story. True story.
Hey, so we're sitting at almost an hour and a half. So I think because we mentioned it, I think we should segue into our next topic, at least for the last 30 minutes. And that is individuals from certain political persuasions flooding to great states like Texas and Florida and some others, and pretty much bringing their politics that destroyed the places they're fleeing from to these new great states. So I'm gonna kick it over to Bruce. I think this is gonna be one that he's gonna like to
I'm gonna say all the obvious, and then you guys can pick up the crumbs. If you live in California and you hate the tax financial structure in California, and you go, hey, I'm gonna move to Texas because things are so much better here. Do not vote like you did in California. because you will just turn Texas into California, and we will have a high tax structure here before in the next 20 years, and you're going to be looking for another state to move to and ruin. So you don't have to. Here's the problem that I see with these people, whether they're from Colorado or New York or California or Washington, Oregon, wherever, is that they go, hey, I'm in a beautiful state, but I can't financially sustain myself here, or I can much better financially sustain myself in a red state like Florida or Texas or wherever. So then they move here, and that's okay. But then their social beliefs are still those that align themselves with the left in California or whatever state that's from. And they start voting that way. These two things are intertwined, the financial and the social. Everything with the left is intertwined with the left, and everything with the right is intertwined. You don't separate those out. You come here and you start saying, hey, socially, I think we should give all this money to all these different people. Where's that money coming from? Now you're affecting the economics, whether it's school, whether it's whatever the case may be, whatever the financial status is, they're all entwined. You can't get away. If you're going to want to move to a state like Texas, you have to be and believe and feel and think like a Texan. I did this. I moved from Georgia to here. Not that, I mean, Georgia is still, I consider it a very red state, and it wasn't necessarily a huge change. But Texas was in many ways even more conservative, say gun friendly, say sort of pro, I don't even know if I quite say libertarian, but maybe, than Georgia anyway. And I embrace those things when I came here. It wasn't a big change for me like it'll be someone from California. But you can't just think that Texas, because of its terrain or its geographical location, is somehow unique and will somehow protect it from your stupid views. If you come here and you vote based on those stupid views, just like you did in California, you will turn Texas into a California over time. And we're seeing that. There's a lot of other implications here that we're dealing with. And if John was here, he would probably say the same is true for Florida, because Florida is another one of those states where people from New York like to move to Florida to retire. Stop voting when you retire if that's what you're going to do, because you're going to turn your retirement community into a shithole like the one that you came from. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
Captain Communism wishes to reply. Yeah, well, I would guess that they would say something akin to this. The same way that, that capitalists will say, well, no, screw that. The same way that a communist will say, well, communism works, it just hasn't been done right. Communists are also very likely to say, or cultural Marxists, I'm sorry. There's more than just communists. Communists is only one type of cultural Marxist. Cultural Marxists would say, yeah, well, capitalism looks pretty good the way you're doing it, Texas, but you're not doing it right. Let me show you how to do it, because you guys are messing up capitalism. And then they'll, in the same breath of air, say, well, yeah, well, we didn't get it done right, and we didn't get socialism done right in California, but that's because we're assholes. So I'll move to Texas and tell you how to run capitalism.
I mean, we're seeing it with the COVID stuff, right? We're almost living in two different Americas. Here in Texas, and I go up to Oklahoma now quite frequently, and Texas and Oklahoma are about the same. Like, nobody wears masks unless you're going into a damn hospital. Nobody wears that shit. I mean, it's you're almost looked at like, what are you doing? Why are you being a moron if you're wearing that stuff? And nobody's, for the most part, nobody's saying that COVID is fake or anything. Obviously, people are have died from this, but it's we can't live like that anymore. And it's not like we know so much more. But you get these people on the East Coast and they come to Texas and it's like, oh my God, why are people not wearing masks and all this other stuff? Well, there's not people dying in the streets here in Texas. I'm sorry, there isn't bodies piling up in Oklahoma either. I mean, it's goddamn. Let's move on. Let's get back to normal. They keep trying to prolong this stuff, but I feel like these people are coming to Texas too. Trying to bring that crap with them.
Yeah, let me
Well,
step in real quick, Brent, just based on that, because I just honeymooned in Florida. And let me tell you about my experience. And let me tell you, I love Florida now more than I ever have. A long time ago, I decided that I would probably retire to Florida, maybe along the East Coast, which I think is where John's from. But I was over on the West Coast, over near between Destin and Panama City Beach. Let me tell you my Florida story. So I get on the plane to fly Southwest from Dallas to Florida. Boy, they are harping on these masks. Now, I have a scam, and I'm going to let you guys that are listening in on this scam. Brent knows my scam. You go to your restaurant in the airport and you buy yourself a meal before you get on your plane. You take that meal onto the plane, and then I nibble on that little meal for the entire flight from the time we take off to the time we land in Florida. Get my freaking mask off my face, okay? And whenever that stewardess comes down the aisle, I'm like, I'm nibbling on something, man. I got a French fry hanging out of my mouth, or I'm drinking from my Coke or whatever. That's my scam, because I'm always looking for ways around authority. But we land, and when we land, I get off and I notice in Florida, even the TSA guys, they got their mask down around their neck like this, like it's a chin holder. They've got the chin bra on. And I'm like, whoa, this is TSA. These guys aren't even wearing masks. Our driver comes up. He's in like board shorts, flip flops. There's not a mask on his body in the airport. He's like, hey, I'm your driver. Let's go. And we're like, oh, shit, if this guy's not wearing his mask in the car, we obviously don't have to wear our mask. I'm going to tell you, the week I spent in Florida, I don't know if I saw a mask. Not in the grocery store, not on the beach, not anybody that was riding bikes up and down the town. Let me tell you what, I looked at DeSantis's number, and I'm crediting DeSantis with this, although it's all Floridians. But with his leadership, I looked at the numbers. That state's not any worse off than New York when it comes to COVID. And New York's got you wearing double mask and all crazy kind of like bubble suits and stuff. So just let me tell you, like I don't want to. I'm not necessarily into the whole mask debate or anything. When this thing first broke, I was a huge mask proponent, and now I'm the exact opposite. I don't think they make a damn bit of difference whatsoever. They're nothing more than a feel-good measure. But Florida, man, let me tell you what. You want to go to a free state in terms of this whole COVID thing, man, Florida, Texas could even take some examples and some leadership from Florida. And I've seen other people's sort of talk about this, kind of like mainstream media talking about DeSantis and our governor here in Texas, that DeSantis is even more out there. Well, give me more of that out there, because I'm all about what he's doing in Florida. He's even got a better hold on it than Texas does, in my opinion. And for you California New Yorkers that are listening, I'm sorry.
I gotta say that, Bruce, I know you say you're not a mask debater, but you sound like a mask debater. Sorry, you said that. I was just like,
only later night after a few drinks, Doc. But I appreciate where your mind is.
Yeah. So thank you. Because I never really got over 14. It keeps me young. Anyway, I say this. We were talking about this right on the lead up, and let me give this as an example. I got to live twice in my life in the great state of Arizona. Really enjoy it. And when I was there in Phoenix for a year, what I noticed was that all the people from the green states, and yes, a big, I think the second biggest destination other than Florida for retirees from New York State is Arizona. And so they have all these people from green states, and they are in a desert valley with 4% humidity, even in 2000. Today, it's something like, I think it's 23% humidity. And they're now calling it, it's changing the ecosystem in the valley. They're now calling it a green valley because they wanted full-size green 18-hole golf courses. They will not only plant green grass in their yard where none exists, everybody else is supposed to be pebbles and dirt, but they'll plant it, but it dies out in a single, it only lasts 6 months. So they replant their grass, like literally pay for sod to come in and then water it so it'll live for 6 months at a time. And they have changed the ecosystem there. And I want to slap every one of them in the head. Like, look, why did you come here? Well, it's the desert and, the low humidity and my asthma and I'm retired. Then stop making it New York, for God's sakes, you moron. Now, if I can't get someone to accept their yard, because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about that, 12 square feet of yard before the cul-de-sac begins. If I can't get them to accept their yard as the desert when they live in the desert, what's the odds I can get them to surrender or change or alter significantly their value systems? The same values, by the way, that they're escaping. They're saying, I don't like that. Well, you don't. What are you going to do differently here? Well, nothing. Yeah, so, I mean, you're really, I hear everybody's angst, and I get it, and I wish it was that way, but I think the reality is human behavior is I want to stay within my comfort zone. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're right there about the comfort zone. We had a phenomena here in Virginia right after 9/11 where there's a place in Southern Virginia, Nelson County, where they have one stoplight, and it blinks all the time. It's not even a working stoplight. That's how rural the community is. Well, right after 9/11, all these New York people come flooding in because they don't want to be on the island. They don't want to be trapped on the island. They want to get out into the countryside. And you have a unique phenomena where the people in Nelson County are going, I can't believe this Yankee just gave me all this money for this land. And you have the guy from New York going, I can't believe this hick gave this land away so cheap. Well, once this phenomenon starts happening, then the local sheriff starts getting complaints because the new people hear gunfire, which, of course, the sheriff's like, yeah, you live in the country. It's deer season. Of course you hear gunfire. And then what follows? The Ruby Tuesday, the TGI Fridays, the Target, now that county has lots of working stoplights. It also has lots of fast food restaurants. It has lots of New York style pizza joints. In Southern Virginia, you have a lot of New York style pizza joints. And you also have lots of Southern Virginians starting to complain about the infringements on their gun rights and their hunting and all that. So it perfectly illustrates your point that people escape one thing and bring the problem with them.
Think about this. You're talking about the exodus of New Yorkers after 9/11. Think about this. All the people living in those really population dense cities, we were told they moved there because they loved the amenities and they wanted to live on top of each other and hear their neighbors arguing below them. No, they didn't. They lived there because it was convenient to get to their work. And once COVID sent them all home to work from home for 18 months, they started buying homes outside the city and they started residing there. So I think what you've just described, you're going to see that. You're going to see an exodus of the cities for those professions that allow you to continue to work from home. And the cat's out of the bag. It's definitely viable.
I saw a comment from Joe D'Amico, he's a guy that him and his brother come to One Shepherd and train, and he said, is there any hope for New York and California? In my opinion, no. And the reason I say that is because California just had a recall election where they had the opportunity to kick their governor out, and after all that crap that Gavin Newsom did to that state during that COVID, I mean, they shut my oldest brother still lives out there, and I went out there to visit him because I was out there for a course through the Marine Corps, and all the crap. I mean, like, you couldn't even go to a restaurant, sit down and eat inside. Just ridiculous bullshit. All that crap that governor did to that state, and they had that recall election, and they just re-voted that guy back in, hands down. And I said, no hope, absolutely no hope.
Not only that, to back that up, Brent, look at who their alternative was, Larry Elder. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I was a fan of him watching his show for the last 4 years. That guy's got a lot to say. He'd be good wherever he went, and he had a decent showing, but you cannot deny he was decisively defeated. I mean, it wasn't this close margin of error thing. It was very clear people like Gavin Newsom and all the crap he's pulling. So I totally agree with you. And for our friends up in New York, Your problem is simple. Long Island. When you look at the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton only got 14 counties in the whole state. She only needed 10 to carry the state. If you don't live in Long Island or connected to it, you're screwed. Your vote doesn't matter. You have no political representation whatsoever. And it's true for other states as well. In Maryland, if you don't live in Montgomery County or Baltimore County, your vote is irrelevant. You have no representation. Because if Montgomery County won't pay for it and Baltimore County won't vote for it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you do. And there's a lot of other states. We could go on listing them on and on, but the point is made. There's a lot of states that if you don't live in the urban area, you don't matter.
Yeah. Okay. So I will say to Joe, keep fighting the good fight. Keep your chin up. In 1890s, New York had a malaria problem, and it doesn't today, which goes to show that if you invent a good pesticide, you'll get rid of the communists. Now, that said, I think we're talking about, we often get to this, should America balkanize? Should it, break off and become all these various, and I think that's, while it's an interesting mental exercise, I think it's unrealistic. What is realistic and would be within our ability to achieve would be to rearrange the vote so that population centers do not, you say Chicago influences the rest of Illinois, and Denver influences the rest of Colorado, and they couldn't be more, politically diametrically opposed to each other. And we could say the same thing about much of New York. Really, we could. So I think it's the separation of the urban and the rural, and that the urban needs to make decisions for the urban and would not appreciate the rural communities making decisions for their city. And vice versa is true. And I think if we can come to some kind of agreement there, then I think there is hope. And in lieu of that, like I said, a good pesticide.
That's a neat point.
I think the true point to what you're saying, Doc, is the greater Idaho concept. Is you kind of redraw the map to match people's political beliefs. I think you'd see a very radically different map, but it would give true representation. The other downside, I think, of that concept is it would increase polarization.
There are some, I'll say this, there are some great conservatives in California, New York, and all of these states that we're talking about, Colorado. There's no doubt about that. There's a huge number, and we kind of tend to gloss over that because, like Doc said, their vote doesn't seem to count, but they are out there. And so for those people, hey, if you're wanting to come to Texas because you're looking for a reprieve politically, or Florida or wherever, then come on, we'll take you on and you'll fit in. You'll be just fine. You'll be just fine here. But in terms of the sort of balkanization of the country, I've always embraced that. And maybe balkanization is not the right term for me, but the fact that there's this, I always tell people, when you vote, don't think about the small, ancillary, unimportant things that the mainstream media is talking about. Come up with about three things that are really important to you as an American, whatever those three things are, whether it's gun rights, freedom of speech, it can be abortion, it can be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't matter. But think about the three things that impact your life the most, and then pick the state that best suits those. That state is there. If you want to have an abortion every other weekend, there's a state that will do that for you. That's where you should be if that's important to you. There's a place for you to go, and it's not far away. You can drive there. You can hop a bus and be there in a day, whatever it is. If it's gun rights, there's states that are for that. If it's freedom of speech, there's states that are for that. Whatever it may be, if you're looking for free child care, health care, free hand-me-outs, there's states that specialize in that love blowing through taxpayer money just to give you free stuff. Go to those states. There's something for everybody in the United States. If people would just embrace that and go where they want to go, I think this problem would kind of solve itself, right? But on the other hand, when you're like, I want values that are important to me in a state that doesn't support those values. Therefore, I'm going to go there and just wreak havoc on everybody else and vote for those things. That's where we run into the problems that we run into.
Yeah, well said, Bruce.
Yeah. And I think the only real logistical problem to what Bruce is saying is family ties. Because you could easily come up from a government program that says, you know what, I'm anti-gun, I want to move to Massachusetts. They could make a government program for that. Or one that says, hey, I'm from California and I'm ridiculously pro-gun, I need to go to Arizona. You know, I'm sure you could make a government program for that very easily. You know, deduct all your moving costs, off you go. But everybody has their family ties for one reason, you know. And I think that's the biggest reason that prevents a lot of moving, you know.
Which is why I would argue, I mean, yeah, because we're saying that, again, sorry, right before to reference an off-camera comment, we were talking about how a red state in America, and I'm not making this up, they're like 60% Republican. They're not 70, 80, 95, 98. We pretend that they are. They're not. Like if they're very, very, very Republican, they're 59%, 61%. Okay? Same is true if they're very, very, very Democrat. This is a blue dog state, by God. We're talking it's 57%. The vast majority of the 50 United States, and I would argue territories, are somewhere between, you know, they're just 5% off the 50% margin, a 50-50 split. They're 5% either way. Okay, they're within that tolerance. So again, to pretend that there's a 95% blue state and a 95% red state, that doesn't pan out in reality. And so while I agree that we should be voting with our feet, and that's what Bruce is saying, I think, and that, of course, is the Balkanization of America. And should it work? Yes. But, you know, there are many different problems with it, and Les brings up one, and that is familial ties. You're just not going to abandon your aging father, who's, you know, you're just not going to do it. So, at least most of us aren't. And so that's why I think a separation of, okay, these are the rural counties, and these are the, of each state, these are the urban counties. Urban counties don't tell rural counties what to do. And vice versa is true. You know, if this, to the point of where if this city says, hey, we're going to have much more strict firearm rules, that used to bother me. The idea that, hey, one state should just be, you know, it should be just level, no matter what, where you are in that state, it should be, I would argue the whole country should just be like a level part when it comes to First and Second Amendments. But you know what? If I'm going to follow my my own logic here and swallow my own medicine, then I'm going to have to admit that Chicago is allowed to make rules for Chicago. And we'll have to abide by those rules. But once you step outside of those counties of Chicago, those rules don't apply anymore. And I'm going to catch rainwater, and I'm going to drink raw milk, and, you know, I'm going to grow marijuana or whatever it is, and I'm going to pay for it all in Bitcoin with my belt-fed machine guns. There we go. Let's just make rules that make sense for our region and stop making rules that you want to impose on other people. I think that's the ultimate rule. I like the golden rule really is don't be a douche. You know, there's prettier ways of saying it, but stop trying to live other people's lives for them, you douchebag. Live your life for you. And that makes me a screaming liberal, which is why I am Captain Communism.
There is so much of that, though. There is so much of that where you go, I've made these decisions for myself, but that's not enough. I'm going to compel you to do the same, feel the same, believe the same as I do. That's not really America, and has never really been America. I mean, if you want to be some crazy nut job, that's okay. I'll tell you, this is America. This is a great place to be a crazy nut job. You know, I don't know. There's other countries that would simply stone you to death or shoot you with a firing squad or burn you on a cross somewhere. this is a great place to be a nut job, but don't force those views on other people. It's reciprocal, right? This respect that we have for one another to make decisions for themselves, even as unconventional as some are, it's reciprocal. It kind of reminds me of sort of like this bit of this gay movement that we had back in the 80s, where they're like, hey, what I do in my bedroom is my business. And I kind of took that on. I kind of agree with that, right? Like, what you do in your bedroom, that is your business. And the government shouldn't be involved in that. But me as a straight heterosexual male, can what I do in my bedroom also be my business? Or must you push your gayness on me? Let's just mutually respect one another on all views, whatever they are, and not push them on one another. I think that's something that we're struggling with in the country today. That is something that we can all work on. Doesn't matter what view it is, whatever the case may be. If you're an anti-gunner, and obviously this is somewhat pro-gun people here at the channel. If you're an anti-gunner and you can make really understandable and compelling views as to why you're an anti-gunner, okay, I'll respect that. But I need you to respect my views as well. And as Americans, we can just be friendly to one another and respect one another and agree to disagree.
Well said, Bruce.
You're starting to sound like a social liberal there, Bruce. Careful. I'm not sure Brent likes that sort of thing. But I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And, that's why I call myself a social liberal, is because I adhere exactly to what you just said. It is the you do you. It says it in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. No other, to my understanding, no other constitution in the world, in the history of the world, has ever said you have a right to pursue happiness. Like, that's not what Canada says. It says life, liberty, and good governance, for example. And so we believe we have the right to pursue happiness, and I agree. And so, the old court case from 100 years ago, the guy who was so happy, I think he had won a lottery or something like this, and he was swinging his arms and he hit the other dude in the nose. And they went to trial. And so, I'm butchering this story because I don't have it sitting in front of me, but it's supposedly a true court case. And he says to the judge, why do I have to, why are you punishing me with fines and his medical bills? Don't I have the right to swing my arms in this country? And the judge says, of course you do. You have the right to be happy and swing your arms, but your rights stop at the end of his nose. You hit his nose, you broke his nose. Come on, dude. And that's it. You have the right to pursue happiness, but you don't have the right to hit me in the nose. Do gays have the right to be gay? I defiantly say yes, they do. Defiantly. Yes. Gays have every right as a human being to express themselves and live the life that they want to and pursue happiness. Does that mean I need to hear about it? This is the end of my nose. Please stop shoving it up my nose. Yeah.
Yeah, my children don't need to be getting taught that at school either.
Not if you don't want them to. Nope. But you say that all the people from San Francisco are moving to Houston, I hear.
Yeah, Austin has already taken over. They've already I imagine that Austin is like the Alamo. Like there's our little Republican government, and it's just surrounded by the enemy. I mean, it's just ridiculous. They Austin PD, like defund the police, has happened right there in Austin, our capital of our Texas. Unbelievable.
Yeah, if you want to come to Texas and keep all of your extreme liberal lefty cuckoo views, Austin's going to be the city for you. You're going to probably have a really good reception there and have a good time. It's strange that it worked out that way, but we have this little city that's just all about that, and it's a good little spot for you to be. Yeah, Austin's a little California. That's sort of true. We all joke about Austin as being that kind of cuckoo uncle that we have,
They got all the homeless living on the streets and tents pitched and everything. Whole 9 yards.
Yeah, you can go there, you can get robbed, you can have gay sex, and you can smoke weed all in one night.
In the streets. Come to Texas.
Yeah. To each their own. you know.
Oh man. Well, I think we beat this point to a pulp, and we're almost at the 2-hour mark. So, closing
Well,
comments.
it was a good stream, shooting from the hip, not really knowing what we were going to do.
100%, guys. We didn't even know what we were going to talk about an hour prior to this kicking off. So.
That is not true. We wrote each other loving emails and love letters for a week before. He's like, yeah, we just totally made this up. Okay. Maybe we did.
Yeah, because we totally planned out going from college education and declining attendance rates to M16 machine guns to Texas versus California. Yeah, we totally mapped that out.
Something for everybody.
Yeah, come on. Of course we were going to talk about machine guns. That's a given.
Duh, America.
Well, let's go around the horn and like I've said multiple times in the past, everybody's got their own respective YouTube channel. And just give a little quick update on your channel and what's coming down the pipe, and then we'll close this out. So start with you, Doc.
Okay. So just getting back after a bit of a hiatus, working with One Shepherd for their 40th, the anniversary of their 40th year of service. So my YouTube channel had kind of went on pause, but it's now back up and kicking. So there's certainly that. I am pushing my next book. I'm talking to the publisher. He's had it for 18 months, but COVID just absolutely ravished the publishing industry. So look for that hopefully early next year. But talking about the wolves closest to the sled, I will be supporting Polaris and Polaris Training and Simulations Division. That's Les's company, along with Southern Front Events, at the MGM Scout Simex. That's a simulation exercise. It's a 30-hour, go for broke kind of miles-based simulation out here in West Virginia. Good grief. That's it's about mid-November. It is Veterans Day. And so I'll be part of that.
All right, so I'm going to be working on a video. We have been working on a video of Brent on LRR, or Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol, Long Range Patrol teams in Vietnam. We will be releasing that fairly soon. We're going to finish filming it up, I think, on Monday. And it's basically going to cover basic gear and equipment that LRP teams use during Vietnam. It's a fairly extensive topic, but we're just going to brush on sort of the highlights as an introduction to that type of to those teams and their service in Vietnam, what gear and equipment they carried. It's been a lot of fun, and we expect for it to be an extremely popular video with millions of views. Again, Brent and I are internet sensations, in case you didn't know. So pretty much, so anything we release on that topic just explodes and goes huge. So you feel free to send your fan mail to Brent, and he will forward it to me. But that's what we've got going on. And maybe I'll be releasing some Vietnam weapons videos throughout this year before the first of the year to sort of coincide with that, more specific on the individual weapons that were used by those teams.
Well, like Doc said, we have MGM Scout coming up second weekend of November. So there's still space. So please come and sign up on my YouTube channel. I just finished up this weekend shooting the Zombie 3-gun Invitational, and I'll be getting videos up about that in the near future. Tomorrow I'm off to Finland to participate in the Finnish Brutality match there next weekend. And when I get back, I'll be putting videos up about that. And when I finally get done sorting through all the tremendous footage I took out at the One Shepherd 40th anniversary, I'll get some videos up about that as well.
Man, I can't believe you're going to Finland. I didn't know that. That's awesome. When are you coming back, Les?
I'll be back in a week. So I leave Tuesday and I get back Wednesday the following week.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. Yeah, guys. So I got several stuff coming down the pipe. I'm actually backed up right now. So I've got the STX situational training exercise video to do over the 40th anniversary One Shepherd. And then after that, I got the monumental task of putting together a video over the field training exercise. that took place on the 40th, and that was just awesome. I've got so much footage, just unbelievable. So much stuff took place during that. And might I add that, all the joking that you guys see the good doctor do in these live streams, he does that during the FTX. In your defense, given your position away, no, I'm kidding. But he does make those jokes. I have some of that on camera while he's doing his OC responsibilities. So I got the one shepherd coverage I got to do, and then like Bruce said, the LERP stuff, big project for us, and we've got about half of it done and filmed. We got to do the other half, so all the gear, and we have the monumental task of making fall Texas look like Vietnam. So we got to get that done. Another thing I want to kick out there is SNS Training Solutions is putting on Winter Forge. Dates for that are January 15th to 17th, January 15th to the 17th. And Bruce and I did that last year, and that was awesome, guys. Cold weather training up in Missouri. It's going to be at the same place, Combat Maneuver Training Center, same place that Alpha Company does its training at One Shepherd. And if you haven't looked into that, I encourage you to do that. SNS Training Solutions, Facebook, Instagram. They also have a website. That is an awesome training experience. And I'm going to put Bruce on the spot here and call him out. Are you going to this or what, dude?
I think I'm going to be working. I think I'm going to be in the butthole of Georgia known as Atlanta for that period of time. So I'm going to get back with you on that. If I'm not, I will make it. But it being in January, last year it wasn't an issue because we didn't do that work detail because of COVID. But it looks like we're going to be a go this year, so maybe not. But I will tell those of you guys that are watching, like Brent said, this is a hell of an experience. We showed up with snow on the ground, and it continued to melt throughout the weekend. And you all know that the worst climate you can be in is that right borderline melting just below freezing snow. It was muddy. It was cold. It was miserable. What does that mean? It was a fantastic training experience. And if you want an opportunity to push yourself, test your gear, learn a lot about tactics and skill set and techniques, I can't think of a better time of the year to go to Missouri than January.
Yeah. I mean, it was, you guys think you know how to operate, and then you go into this cold weather environment. It's like, there are things that you learn there. It's like that, for instance, you can't keep your weapon inside the heated tent in that cold weather environment. You have to keep it outside. You got to detach yourself from, certain mindsets. It's a whole new way of operating. So anyway, check that out, guys. That's coming down the pipe. I'm looking forward to doing that. So that's pretty much all I got, guys. Anybody got any final comments?
Yeah, if Bruce doesn't go to Winter Forge, he has to go to MGM Scout. It's just that way. It's like in the Constitution, dude.
Maybe I'll do that because I haven't been to that one before. So maybe we'll mix it up. But I'm still hoping that I'll be able to make it. We'll see what they decide. They decide with this work detail.
Awesome. All right, fellas. That concludes live stream number 8, I think. Yep.
Wow.
Live stream number 8. So appreciate you guys tuning in.